crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsStamp.com. Welcome back for another Yippee for Yana episode. In this video, I'm stamping a one-layer card, and let me tell you, it has been ages since I've done a one-layer project. So I'm stamping a one-layer card using the Simons Stamp Sunshine Background Stamp. All supplies I'm using in this video are listed and linked in the video description below. So here's a look at this stamp. I already have it mounted on my MISTI stamping tool. I usually use my black MISTI, but I don't know what happened to it. I couldn't find it in my craft room, and my craft room is not that messy today. So I don't know what happened to it. So I had to use my very first MISTI. So this stamp set is brilliant. It's not a single stamp, but rather a grouping of individual sections that make up this beautiful sunray design. And because all of these sections are separate, this gives you options. You can stamp each section in a different color of ink. You don't need to do any masking or whatever. It's just that much more easier to use. Now, because I have all of these individual sections, I can easily stamp them in different ink colors. There are 12 sections, so I selected 12 different colors of ink, because why not? I actually used the Simons Stamp Pawsitively saturated inks. They come in nice groupings of 3, so there's a light shade, a medium shade, and a dark shade of the same color, and they have a very pretty, very fresh color palette. The colors I picked are yellow and orange, and some peachy colors, but you can switch up the colors and, use greens, teals, purples, whatever you want to do, whatever color combinations you need and like. When I was looking at this stamp, I wasn't looking at it as a sunshine image or image of sun rays. I was rather looking at it as an abstract design. And if you treat this as an abstraction, you can do any colors you want. These can be brown. These can be purple. I don't know. These can be these can be red, whatever you want, really. I used Simons Stamp 130-pound cardstock. You guys know me. This is my go-to paper. I love using this paper for anything stamp related. It is very thick and smooth. It is just a dream to work with. Now, it is a little bit on the expensive side, but so worth it. Now, I made a little holder with tape and used it to place and hold my paper inside my MISTI. My paper panel is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and this will make the front of my card. You can hypothetically stamp directly onto the card base, but I always prefer to stamp onto a panel and then adhere that panel onto a card. I'm going to stamp these abstract sections one by one, stamping each in a different color of ink. Now, I first removed the central circle section. I'm not going to stamp that one at all, but I will use a circle stamp, sentiment stamp, in that open area instead, and I'll do that later. So next, I removed 2 sections directly next to the section that I was planning to start with. So this gives me plenty of room around my main section to ink up my section, ink up my stamp without getting the ink on the other sections of this stamp. So that's why it's so handy. That's why it's so convenient that we have these individual sections. We can take them out, ink up our stamp, and, not worry about masking, getting the ink all over the place, that sort of thing. Now, I found it is easier to position all of the sections onto my MISTI and remove sections that are in the way versus having just one section on the MISTI and trying to align all consecutive sections next to it. When you do the aligning, and I tried doing it this way, you might not align it perfectly and you end up having a wonky design. That area, that circle area, the open area, it might not end up being a circle. It might end up being like, a wonky oval or something if you do the one by one. I hope that makes sense. So this way, the way I'm doing things here, it's easier to have a perfectly round space in the center from which these colorful rays are radiating. If you don't care if the space is round or not, you can definitely stamp these one by one and just do the aligning as you do your stamping. Now, with the first section stamped, I cleaned it using a wet baby wipe and I popped the 2 missing sections back in place. I then removed the section that I had just stamped. I removed one more, skipping one that I was planning to stamp next. So I used my second shade of yellow ink for this section, and I stamped it onto the background. And you can see this gives me plenty of space to ink up my sections without being restricted in my movements. I'm not worried that I'm going to accidentally ink up any of the other sections. So doing it this way is very convenient. I kept stamping the sections one by one using the same principle until I had the background fully done. And it didn't take long at all, less than 10 minutes, and I had an absolutely gorgeous, colorful background for my card. Just in case you're curious, the colors I used are the following: lemonade, sunbeam, citrine, melon, cantaloupe, sherbet, cheeky, blush, pucker, peachy, grapefruit, and mandarin. I love using these positively saturated inks from Simon because first of all, they do not stain my stamps, and I can easily go from one color to another if I need to. Plus, these ink colors are just amazing, and these inks stamp really well. For the most part, I did single stamping when I was making this background. I did not need to double or triple stamp these as I have to do with some of the other inks that I have in my stash. So here's a look at the stamped background. I mean, gorgeous. Love all of the colors here, and I really want to go ahead and try stamping this design in other colors of ink that I have from Simon. Just experiment and have like a color day in my craft room. Okay, moving on. I have now placed my panel inside my mini MISTI, and I want to stamp a sentiment in that open circle. I looked through my stash as I wanted to find a circle sentiment, and I found one from this older stamp set from Simon. This is the Just Because Word Mix 2 set, and I'm stamping this sentiment in gray ink. This is Earl, also from Simon Says Stamp. It makes the perfect center for my card. I'm double stamping this just in case, to be sure to have the perfect impression. If you want to add a layer to your card, if you're feeling adventurous and you don't want to make a one layer card, you can stamp this onto a separate panel, cut it out using a circle die, and pop it up on your card. That would also look nice. Okay, I do want to add additional sentiments to this card, and my plan is to add a sentiment to each of the colorful array sections. So I looked through my stash because I needed to find a sentiment stamp set, and I found this really cool stamp set from Kathy Zilski. This is the Simple Sentiments 02 set, and it has just a bunch of different sentiments. So the font here is all the same. The size of the font is all the same in these, but the length of these sentiments is different, making them a great pick for this card design, as some of the rays here are super long, and then some of the rays are super short. So I need to have sentiments that are different in length. Now, here's my test panel. I do stamp test panels all the time when I'm planning a card design. And here I stamp these secondary sentiments in the same gray ink. Now, I have another test panel with other ink colors. I was going for a rainbow here, so you can see different ideas in different color options. So these secondary sentiments, I actually prefer to stamp them in black ink. Gray didn't look like it had enough contrast to me, so that's why I went with black. And I used VersaFine ONYX black, but the gray also looks very nice. And the beauty of gray ink is that it will not smear. The VersaFine ONYX black is a fantastic ink. It's my favorite black ink, but it is a pigment ink, and the paper that I'm stamping on has a bit of a coating, and that makes the pigment ink dry a lot longer. And I mean a lot longer. And what this also means is that there's a risk of you smearing the ink. So what I'm trying to say, you need to be very careful when using this black ink, or, use some other black ink that doesn't take that long to dry, or use gray. So I stamped some of these smaller sentiments using a clear block that just made it easier versus, using a MISTI for the really tiny messages. And then the longer sentiments, I positioned them on my panel. I positioned several at a time, and then I used my MISTI to stamp several at once. So I ended up having sub-sentiments on each of the colorful rays, and I think this is such a fun pick-me-up card. You know, you have a bunch of different messages. They're really nice and fun. The card says a little note, and then the secondary sentiments say, hey, heck yeah, you're the coolest, so very grateful for you, XOXO, you rock, I am a fan, #truth, another hey, just because I didn't have any other small sentiments for that section, and boom. So lots of fun additional sentiments for this card. With the stamping done, I adhered this panel to an A2 side folding card base, and it's a 1 layer. You know, this is not very typical for me. I tend to add a lot of dimension and layers to my cards, but this is a step outside my comfort zone, and I love it. Lastly, I added a couple of sequins. These are aura sequins from Spellbinders. I needed to add at least one sequin because I made, a boo-boo. There was a black fingerprint on my card, so I needed a sequin to cover that up, because I managed to get some black ink transfer where it was not supposed to be. So I had to add a sequin over that section to cover it up. And from there, I just added additional sequins to dress up this card. So here's a look at my finished project. Hope you like it. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. If you make a card inspired by this video, as always, we'd love it if you shared your project online and tagged us on social media. We always enjoy seeing what you make. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.